It's Gary. Whew. All right. Pastor Kathy just blew up the room, and I changed. Yeah, that's normal. That's awesome. Yeah, welcome to the well. And so I changed my message. So that will be fun. And but you guys have amazing pastors here. You guys know that, right? You guys have amazing pastors, and it's been awesome just to get to know these guys. And Jamie has been here so many times with you guys, and so I kind of this was my first shot, my first time. So it was just such a blast just to be over the weekend, and now I get to be with you guys on a Sunday, and my phone's ringing, and it's my beautiful wife. Just take it. Yeah, I should. I'll just, see, she's calling again, but I'm gonna FaceTime her because that'd be way better. So that's going on, and we had an amazing time. I had a word of knowledge last night about a car accident 2 years ago, and there was. Oh, she keeps trying to call me on a regular phone. I'm like, no, let's talk on FaceTime, babe. And so, anyways, we had a couple people that were in a car accident like a month ago. Hey, sweetie, that's my little girl. She just woke up. It's West Coast time. Hi, Brielle. Hey, little sweetheart. Can you say, Jesus, come?
Jesus, more Jesus.
Say, I love you, Daddy. I miss you so much. Yeah, I'm going to see you in late tonight. Okay. Say hi to everybody. Brielle, you are the cutest little girl. If you just want to release fire, you just go for it. Oh my gosh. Bye. Love you. Love you, honey. Hey, Jules. Bye, hon. That's my little girl. Only these guys could see her in the front, and she's like a little cutie. And but she is a fireball. We went to Hawaii in December, and my wife was getting in the rental car, and I had all the bags and had her, and she had just turned 2, and she ran towards a security guard and put her hands on her knees and said, "Pray." And she just started weeping, the security guard, because she said, "God, if you're real, heal my knees. You need to take all the pain in my knees." And then she gets healed. So it was pretty awesome. And I love my little girl. So, yes, I will take that phone call any day of the week. But, man. So, yes, we had a lady who, we had a couple of people get healed over, they were in a car accident last month, and they got healed. And then there was a lady last night that got healed where it was actually 2 years anniversary. She remembered, I got in an accident mid-October 2 years ago. So it was almost exactly 2 years, and God healed her in her shoulders and in her neck, and it was pretty awesome. And we just had an amazing time. I found out this guy delivers pizzas because, that's, I'm telling you, the Lord is going to speak to you in the car. There's just car ministry. I had, this is not when I was delivering pizzas, but I had a season where I saw 5 to 7 car accidents a week, where I would stop and pray for people and see people get healed, saved, and set free. And I'm like, God, what are you doing? He's like, hey, I'm ordaining your steps. What you need to do is you need to introduce yourself. I'm Chad. I've been sent here by heaven. What do you need? And so that's what I would do. Julia, my wife, she's really practical and amazing. So she got me road flares for my birthday. because she just was like, you can't keep running out in the highways and all this stuff and not have road flares. Like, it's super dangerous. And I'm like, sure. I mean, so this was in Southern California, and it's pretty, within a couple minutes, you'll have a first responder. You know, in the first couple, like in about 7-10 minutes, you'll have a police car, ambulance, you know, firefighter, somebody will come. And so this would be before anyone came. And so people were freaked out to drive in my car, and I said, I never was in any accidents, so my car's the safest place. But it happened for about a good 3 months where I saw like just crazy car accidents, and I would stop off, and people would get healed. People would, it was pretty crazy. There was a couple times when they were unconscious, and then they would come back, and the whole deal. We couldn't feel a pulse. I don't know if they were dead. I don't think they were, but because I just don't really want to even say that in the areas of, you know, I didn't know. We couldn't find a pulse, and then they would come back, and they would get fully healed as well. So it was really fun. But I'm telling you, you're going to see crazy stuff like that, like miracles, you know, in the car and stuff. So have fun with that. We have a couple of books with us. The Risk Factor, it's a book that my dad and I wrote. In the conference, I talked about one of my junior high kids. I was a junior high pastor for a number of years. One of my junior high kids walked on water, and that was pretty cool. And so there's like, I have a whole chapter dedicated to like all the miracles my junior high kids saw. My wife and I did a trip around the world for 18 months and saw crazy stuff, and so that's in there. And it's just about taking risk. I mean, if you look at that book and you're like terrified of it, you should probably get it. You know, we're all called to take risk. And, you know, some people might be taking bigger risks. You don't need to compare yourself to someone else. It's just, what's the risk look like today for you? You know, and that we're called to step out of the boat. And then last night I talked about the Jewish people movement quite a bit. And this is Lonnie Frisbee. This is his book where they took his journals and they compiled it and made it into a book, and it is phenomenal. It is incredible. It really is carrying an impartation for another Jesus people movement. And I'm telling you, salvation is like, there is, fish are beginning to jump in the boat, you know, and that's awesome. Like, fish are jumping in the boat. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about the Father's love this morning. And the spirit of adoption, because we're about ready to just see one of the craziest like moves of God. And one of the things that's going to mark this move is the spirit of adoption. Now, I was going to talk this morning a bit about relationships and community, and so I'm kind of going to like touch on that a little bit. But if you don't have the spirit of adoption thing flowing through your life, it's really hard to have relationships. And so I'm just going, you know, just to go after this whole place of the Father's love, spirit of adoption. I know that there's a lot of us here that we maybe been abused by spiritual leaders or by our, you know, fathers and mothers in our life. And it's so important to get healed by the Father in heaven so that he begins to redeem and restore what's happened in the past. That maybe... And if you don't get healed of those places, then it begins to skew your perspective of your Heavenly Father. Like maybe you had a dad who was working all the time and would make promises of we're going to play catch or we're going to hang out, and then, you know, work would come up. And so it's like you begin to form a perspective of my Heavenly Father is too busy to hang out with me. That, you know, he's got kings and queens to appear to. He's got kids that are starving in Africa. He's got moves of God happening in different places. And it would be such a lie to believe that. It says, like, and in the Psalms, it says he watches you while you sleep. I know it's a little freaky, but he watches you while you sleep. Like he'll never leave you nor forsake you. Like he's always with you. You have a Heavenly Father that's not too busy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the spirit of adoption, and you can just turn to Romans 8. Romans 8, verse 14. All those led by God's Spirit are God's sons, for you did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself testifies together with our spirit that we are God's children, and if children, also heirs, heirs of God, and co-heirs with Christ, seeing that we suffer with him so that we may also be glorified with him. So this is what the spirit of adoption looks like. And if you look at Romans, where Paul is very familiar with Roman custom, Roman law, and that he's using this language, the spirit of adoption. Like, have you ever thought about why he's using that language? Because in Roman law, if you have a son or daughter in the natural, it's legal to disown them. But when you choose to adopt, when you choose this child and to adopt them, it's illegal to disown them. That's why he's using this language, the spirit of adoption. God has chosen you. We're talking about the reckless love of God. When the spirit of adoption comes into your life and your spirit begins to agree with the Spirit of God, I am a son, I am a daughter. Like there's a confidence that comes. There's this, I know that I'm a son. It breaks competition. It breaks comparison. It breaks jealousy. It breaks envy. It brings this security of, oh, wow, I'm made in his image. Like there never was another Chad Michael Dedmon, and there never will be another Chad Michael Dedmon. There's something special in my DNA that no one else has. No one is able to replicate. I love it when like people encourage you, or people, like Jamie, where it's just like, oh man, he inspires me, he encourages me. But you'll always be, if you try to become like Jamie Galloway, you'll always be a bad version of Jamie Galloway. Like there's this place with the spirit of adoption where you become comfortable in your skin. You become comfortable that you have this revelation that I am God's favorite. And what's amazing is God has the capacity for everyone to have this revelation. That I touch his heart in a way when I'm fully who I am and fully embrace who I am in him, that I am able to touch his heart in a way no one else could touch it. I'll never forget, it was one of the first conferences I did. I was with Bobby Connor. And Bobby, I was speaking the Saturday morning. Bobby was doing the Friday night. And I was about 24 years old. And I was pretty nervous. No, I was 23. I was pretty nervous. And Bobby, is this crazy prophetic guy. And he calls out this witch in the back. And she starts cursing him when he exposes her, and she starts cursing him, and he says, listen, if you don't repent right now, the curse that you're releasing over me is going to be like a boomerang, is going to come back on you if you don't repent and ask Jesus to come into your life right now. And they do this crazy spiritual showdown, and she gets thrown against the wall, and she starts repenting and all this stuff, and she gets delivered and then gets saved. Then he looks at this guy in a wheelchair and says, you have bone cancer. God's healing you right now. He gets up out of the wheelchair and starts dancing, and he goes, that's the power of God, and the light explodes. And I'm going, oh Lord. So I was in the hotel room that night about 3 a.m. just praying, God, you've got to show up. Look who I'm following up. I'm following up. I got to have lightning bolts come out of my fingertips. I've got to have to levitate. Something crazy is going to have to happen to follow up Bobby Connor. And the Father comes to me and says, Chad, you have a decision to make. You could go out there tomorrow morning and be a preacher. And as a preacher, you're going to have good messages and sometimes insane, awesome messages. Or you go out there tomorrow and be a son. And as a son, you can never fail. As a son, you can never have just okay messages. But the decision is up to you. And before I preached, I was like, okay, I just choose to be a son. And all that pressure to perform just lifts right off. You're just able to be you. You have two big lies from the enemy. Did God really say you could eat that? To get you to question, what did God say? Did God really say that, everyone could be saved? Did God really say that everyone could be healed? Did God really say a nation could be saved in a day? to get you to question what did God say. That's what Satan did with Adam and Eve. And then the other big lie is, if you truly are the Son of God, speak to this rock and command it to be bread. If you really are the Son of God, if you're really who you say you are, Jesus, throw yourself from this building and angels will come. And Jesus was so secure in his identity that he looked at the devil and said, I don't need to prove myself to you. Now, he still moved in the miraculous. He still moved in signs and wonders. I mean, the guy came from a signs and wonders conference, and he's walking on the road, and the Pharisees are like, hey, if you're truly who you say you are, perform for us a sign and wonder. He had the capacity. He had the ability, but he was like, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to get me to prove my sonship. I don't need to prove myself. So you're going to have the enemy, and you're going to have the religious spirit to try to get you to question your identity as a son, as a daughter. But you still manifest sonship and daughterhood, but it's coming from a place of, I'm already accepted. It's coming from a place of, I'm already operating out of that place of a love and acceptance that I'm not working for love, I'm working from love. And when the spirit of adoption comes on you, it actually commissions you for the supernatural, and you begin to understand that you have been commissioned to advance the family business. Jesus. I'll maybe get into that for a second. I'll hit that now, then we'll go into spiritual fathers and mothers. Jesus in Matthew 3 was baptized in the River Jordan with John the Baptist. And it was that moment, you have to understand Jewish culture, Jewish custom. When a boy becomes a man, the father takes his boy into the marketplace and announces, this is my son. Like, I trust him to now advance the family business. He doesn't need my signet ring. He doesn't need my permission. He doesn't need someone who's older. He doesn't need, I trust him with all of the family's resources to do transactions in this marketplace, that he has all of the family's resources, all the cattle, everything, to make transactions to advance our family business, because now he's not just a boy, he's a man, and he's my son, and he's going to carry on the family business. And that's what the Father was doing with Jesus in Matthew 3. This is what began to propel him into advancing the kingdom of heaven. I'm only about my Father's business. I mean, Jesus was the perfect model of sonship. Like, he would say these crazy things like, the Son could do nothing apart from the Father. If you see me, you see the Father. You know, some of the greatest times of Jesus' ministry, he would leave to go be with the Father, which is so crazy to me. Like this, the multiplication of fish and loaves, that's one of the top 5 miracles of Jesus. And it was everyone, Jesus was in preach mode, and he's preaching to the point that people are starving. They need food. They're in a desolate place. And then heaven comes and breathes on the fish and loaves, and everyone eats, and then they have leftovers. You would have thought that was heaven endorsing Jesus' message, and the Father saying, keep going. And it was in that moment of revelation of oh wow, this is the Son of God. He leaves and goes, and he's with the Father. Okay, let me just hit this point a little bit harder. You guys know the Father and the Son, they have a pretty close relationship, right? Pretty tight. Probably the tightest relationship anyone's ever had. They're the most connected anyone's ever been. Correct? And they've had no beginning in their relationship. They've always been. Wrap your mind around that, and they always will be. They're going to have forever together. So you would have thought Jesus would have had a conversation with his dad. Hey, I'm going down to the planet, and I've got 3.5 years. From 12, I'm going to know who my daddy is. I mean, that's when we kind of get a snapshot of where else would I be? I'm in my Father's house. Me and him are hanging out. So from 12 to 30, he was spending time with his Father. And so he's like, Dad, I got 3.5 years of public ministry. I got 3.5 years to pass the baton, to disciple these guys, to pass the keys of the kingdom, the keys of the church to these guys. And look who you're giving me to work with. I've got this guy called Doubting Thomas. I've got this guy, Peter. He's going to chop a guy's ear off, like, right before I leave the planet. And he's going to be the rock of the church. I got Judas. I mean, like these are the guys. So, Dad, I love you. Like, I love hanging out with you, but I got to really pay attention. So I'll see you later. And that's not at all what happened. Some of his craziest moments of ministry, he would go and just be with the Father. And he only had 2 times where you get a little snapshot of how the Father and the Son and their dynamic of a relationship, where both times the Father says, this is my Son, whom I love and I'm well pleased with. In the baptism and then the Mount Transfiguration, listen to him. This is my Son, whom I love. I mean, I think Jesus was totally going to be with his Father and getting downloaded with, the itinerary and the whole deal. But I think, way bigger than that, he was just getting lavished on by his dad. Jesus, I love you. You are my Son. And if Jesus was dependent on the Father's love, how much more dependent on the Father's love should we be? And that was one of his biggest ingredients for success and longevity, was this relationship he had with the Father. This is what we're all called to. This is what's all available to all of us. And I know that some of us, we maybe have been hurt by authority figures and by fathers and mothers. But I'm telling you that he begins to heal those places. And as he heals those places, then you begin to trust. Because there is this whole thing about your vertical relationship with God and then your horizontal relationships. And they're way more connected than you realize. How can you say you love God and hate your brother? And so it's so important that, you can be justified in your hurt, but it's that place of letting go, that place of letting offense go. But it's that place of letting the Father in heaven heal you. And it's not too late to ever be a son, to be a daughter. It's not too late to let the Father's love just crash into your life. It says in Deuteronomy and Proverbs, you have the 10 Commandments, and you have one of them that releases a promise. And it's honoring your father and mother. And it gives you long life. Who here would like to live a long life? Okay. So it gives you long life when you honor your father and mother. I think this isn't just a personal promise. I think this is a promise for the corporate church. And one of the missing ingredients for longevity of revival that never ends. Fathers and mothers and sons and daughters are called to run together. I talked a little bit last night about God healing the generations, and that we do. We have a value for one another because honor is value, right? One of the definitions of honor is value. Is that you would begin to form in your heart a place of value for your fathers and mothers. And you're not restricted just to have one, father and mother. Maybe you guys have one in the natural for sure, but you can have as many spiritual fathers and mothers as you want. I call these bummer scriptures in the Bible, where Paul says you have many teachers, but not many fathers. Jesus is talking to his hometown, Nazareth, in Luke 4, and he says a prophet is without honor in his hometown. I call that a bummer scripture because Jesus was actually saying, hey, there needs to be a shift where prophets feel the most honored in their hometown. And Paul's saying, hey, there needs to be a shift where there's way more fathers and mothers than there are teachers. We're called to have many fathers and mothers. And when you honor a prophet in the name of a prophet, you receive what? The prophet's wilderness season, right? No, you receive a prophet's reward. What that prophet has cultivated, what that prophet has fought for, given his life for decades, you get freely when you honor, when you value. But you can replace prophet with pastor, teacher, apostle, evangelist, father, or mother. When you begin to see that father, you begin to honor that father in the name of the Father, you receive that father's reward. And you're not just stuck with just your natural mom and dad. You get to have, I have great parents, and they're not insecure that I have many different spiritual fathers and mothers. And I have fathers and mothers in my life that you've heard of, but I have fathers and mothers in my life that no one's ever heard of. I've got fathers and mothers in my life that are speaking into my marriage, that are speaking into my ministry, that are speaking, into like money, into my surfing. You can have all kinds of different fathers and mothers. It's beginning just to have eyes to see the gold, what they're carrying, and going, wow, I value that. Like, I'm in need of that. And one of the greatest places of a father or mother in your life is that you could give them the keys of your destiny and completely trust them, that the wisdom, where they see blind spots in your life, that you could completely trust them because they have no other agenda but to see you step into the fullness of your call. They're not there to manipulate you. They're not there to control you. I mean, I've seen like fathers and mothers spiritually that never really got that spirit of adoption and that place of knowing that they're a son, they're a daughter, and then they see the next generation and they get really insecure and then they begin to control and shut them down. Like, oh wow, the people like see how gifted this person is. Like my job might be in jeopardy. But the deal is when you know you're a father or mother, you understand that you can never be fired from being a father or mother. And it's actually really good when your sons and daughters go way beyond you. Like Elijah and Elisha, I love that story. It's an amazing story, but there's been some people in the church, and just in religion I'll hear people go, oh, this is my Elisha, which means like they always get their coffee and hold their bags and all that stuff. But you have to understand with Elisha and Elijah deal is when you have that dynamic going on, because Elisha didn't step into the double portion until Elijah was taken up in the whirlwind. So that communicates, okay, while I'm serving the Elijah, I'm on spiritual timeout, and I can't really step into what I'm called to until my spiritual father's gone. So basically, a generation that's younger begins to agree with the spirit of death so that they get to have a turn and play. But the deal is what God's doing is he's raising up Elijahs and Elishas to run together. Caleb's and Joshua's to actually run together. This is a big deal to God, by the way. Malachi 4:6. Like every preacher knows, you always save your best point in a message, for last. And so God is speaking in the Old Testament, and then he doesn't speak for over 500 years. And the last thing he says is, I'm going to come with a move of God where I'll begin to connect the hearts of the fathers to the children and the children's hearts towards the fathers. Or else I'm going to release a curse in the land. So this is, and then he doesn't talk for over 500 years. This is a big deal to God. This whole place of the spirit of adoptions and fathers and mothers and sons and daughters running together. We need one another. You guys doing okay? I mean, sometimes fathers and mothers, you'll know that they're fathers and mothers in your life, with the inconvenience. I always thought to God, I'm like, God, why did you not commission Heidi and Roland Baker to take Mexico, to be a father and mother in Mexico? It's all the way in Mozambique. For us Californians, and we have to fly, it's literally around the world. It's like the other side of the planet. And I'm like, yeah, God, that just makes sense that they're one of my main fathers and mothers. I understand inconvenience. Inconvenience is an invitation, is a place of impartation from heaven. Please never restrict impartation to the laying on of hands. We're in an impartation service every day of our lives. To understand inconvenience are opportunities from heaven, and then also offense is opportunities from heaven. They are. The people, those spiritual fathers and mothers, potentials, and they offend you, they probably have something for your life. I'll never forget it. I went down to Southern California. I was in second year school ministry, and I was traveling with Bill and Chris. And we went down to Pasadena to Harvest Rock, Cheon's church. And I have a bunch of friends, from seeker sensitive or they don't believe in the gifts. And I grew up in Orange County, and so I had, a few friends like that. And they'd be like, oh, Chad, you're just weird. You're just special. You're just a little different. Or, somehow you're doing crazy stuff, but that's not normal for everybody else. And And I was like, okay, you need to come hear Bill Johnson, because when you hear Bill Johnson, like, healing makes sense. You could be like, healing is not for today. And then you hear Bill, and it's like, oh, yeah, like it makes sense now. And so I was trying to set my friends up for success and invite them to go hear Bill. And then, they couldn't. They canceled. Like, hey, I'm like, well, okay, come tomorrow night. Heidi Baker will be there. It's a little more risky because she'll be on the ground saying Shabbat. But you can't deny the fruit of what's going on in a nation. Like Mozambique is getting hit with the love of God, which, by the way, is one of the greatest models of the spirit of adoption, because she does not like it when you say, oh, you run orphanages. No, she runs children's centers, and it's like these kids are not orphans. They have been adopted into a spiritual family, and so they have the village of love, the village of hope, the village of joy, and these kids are just getting rocked with the love of God, and they're changing a nation, which is pretty amazing. Yeah, it's get excited about that. And so I was invited my friends to that, and they couldn't come, and so that's the last night of the conference, and they all come. It's a Sunday night. They all come, and it's this lady, Jill Austin. I've never seen her before. Didn't know who she was. I knew that she was really prophetic. This is in 2003, and so I'm like, okay, this is going to be a little risky. I don't know who this lady is. And so she gets up there. I've got like 10 of my friends. Do you ever bring like 10 of your friends to like a charismatic service, and you're like going, oh man, I don't know how they're going to like perceive it and do it. And so, Jill comes up there, and she just goes, there's people, the Lord spoke to me, there's people here that are pregnant in the spirit. And so, Lord, let the birth pangs start, God. And then hits the pulpit. And all these older gentlemen, like in their 60s, are like sitting next to me and my friends, and they just go, wah! And I'm like, oh, what is happening? I've never seen this manifestation before. And then Jill goes, get in birthing positions. And then like these men lay down on the ground, and Jill goes, raise up the midwives, God, raise up the midwives. And so these other guys, these other, gentlemen, they grab the legs of their friends and like, I see the head of revival. Like, keep pushing. It was bad. Like I'm not even going to go into, like, she went through the stages of birthing. Yeah, and I was, single guy. I was dating my wife at the time, but I had no idea about birthing. And she did like a whole, tutorial. Yeah. You're in transition. And I'm just like, what in the world? So I'm going, man, what is going on? My friends grab me and they say, Chad, we've come here tonight because we knew you were a part of a cult. And I thought to myself, maybe I am a part of a cult. Like, what the heck is this? And I'm like, wait, no. And I grab my friends and I'm like, look at me. Don't look over there. I don't know what that is going on right there. Just look at me. I'm like, you guys know me. You could trust me. Like, let's go. So I took them to this like side room in Harvest Rock and grabbed a bunch of second-year students, and I had them put on white robes and drink this crazy juice. No, I'm joking. Like, I brought them in this side room, and we just move in the prophetic, and they're crying. They're hearing God's voice for the first time. They're getting just rocked, and God totally saved the day. And I was like, okay, this lady, Jill Austin, like, I could honor her from afar. Like, one of my mandates is not birthing revival babies. Like, that's not my ministry. And I was like, well, maybe that's her cup of tea. It's just not mine. And just love her, but am I going to go to another one of her meetings? Probably not. And then about a year and a half later, I'm just being real. Like in a year and a half later, I go to the parking lot. I'm meeting a buddy for lunch, and I park my car, and I'm walking out. He meets me in the parking lot. He goes, hey, I've got a special treat for you. I brought this lady. And I'm like, oh, you're so nice. Like, yeah, she's really prophetic, and I think she's going to really speak into your life. I feel like maybe you even need to run with her and in life. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's awesome. Who is this lady? And he goes, Jill Austin. And everything in me was like, I have a doctor's appointment. I have a dentist appointment. I've got to like get out of this meeting. And the Lord speaks to me and says, Chad, are you going to let offense keep you from stepping into the next place that I have for you? And it was in that moment of like, oh, wow, I've got offense. Like I don't want anything to do with this lady. I don't want anything to do with this ministry. And so I sat down with her. I'm like, okay, I need to break this offense in my heart. And so I just asked her questions. I asked her about her journey with God. And we just began to just laugh together, weep together as I began to hear about her journey and how God has breathed upon her life. And then she opens up her journal and she slides it over to me. And she was a part of the whole Kansas City, prophets and Kansas City prayer, IHOP. And so this was 10 years earlier. She's in the prayer room with Mike Bickle, and the Lord speaks to her, and I read the journal entry. It's exactly 10 years, and says, Jill, I'll give you 2 sons, one named Sean, one named Chad. She says, Chad, I've been waiting for you for 10 years. And I could have missed it if I would have let offense keep me there. She ended up being one of the craziest, amazing spiritual moms I ever had. She would take me out to lunch, and she said, Chad, you're a forerunner, you're a pioneer. Like, these are the hits that I've taken as a pioneer. Let me help you to not have the same kind of hits and how to navigate with some more wisdom. And she would take my wife out to breakfast and say, Julia, I've been a women in ministry, and I've taken hits this way, and let me help you to not take those same hits. And she just began to just pour out her life, and she would invite us to come speak at her prophetic conferences. And then what was crazy is she moved about 4 or 5 times. And I'd go and help her move, and I would show up, and there'd be like 2 other people there. And she had a lot of stuff. And I'd be like, man, what is this? And so I would, call up my junior high kids, my young adults, and say, hey, we're going to help like a legend move. We're going to help a mom move. And it's crazy how many people show up to the prophetic conferences, but how many people show up to help somebody move. And talking about Elijah and Elisha, I believe Elisha modeled one of the ways to get the craziest impartation on someone's life is by doing life with them. Like, one way to get a double portion is like helping people move, and not with the agenda of getting an impartation, the agenda of, hey, there's a heart connection here, and I want to lay down my life for you. Jesus. Many followers of mothers. Many followers of mothers. I talked about Lonnie Frisbee, and this guy was anointed. This guy was catalytic for 3 different moves of God: the Jesus People movement, Calvary Chapel, the Vineyard. He went all through different nations, and he had a pretty rough childhood. He was sexually abused by his babysitter. His uncle found out, didn't tell anybody. Was in the whole hippie movement and was experimenting with drugs, and he got radically saved in Joshua Tree on acid. And then he gets picked up by Chuck Smith's son-in-law and gets taken to his house, and then revival begins to break out. His wife ended up having an affair on him, and he got really, really hurt, another place of wounding. And he began to work with the Shepherd Movement guys, and then the Vineyard happens. He's at Mother's Day, and basically, if you listen to that message, which is available on YouTube, it's amazing. He basically says, I'm back. And he's coming from a place of where he just got divorced and the whole deal. He was in Santa Cruz for a while. And he comes down to John Wimber's church in Yorba Linda, which was actually still Calvary Chapel at the time. And he just says, Holy Spirit, come. And the Holy Spirit starts hitting the kids and then starts hitting the adults. And it's crazy. And then he was, dealing from the years of abuse, and he ends up messing up in a same-sex relationship and confesses, and then he gets removed out of leadership. He's going through it. And it's about 3 months later that he shows up to the Vineyard on a Sunday night, where one of my spiritual followers was speaking, Eddie Pioric, who's just put a stake in the ground for the Father's love. And so Eddie is speaking that night on the spirit of adoption on a Sunday night. And the place just just goes crazy. Like people are just getting hit with the Father's love for the first time. God's healing people of just wounds from their parents or wounds from authority figures. And he suddenly sees the crowd part during ministry time and sees Lonnie just weeping. Goes over to Lonnie and goes, Lonnie, what can I do for you? And Lonnie looks at him. This guy has preached to tens of thousands of people, was on the cover of Time magazine. God moved him like, 3 different moves of God. He looks at Eddie and goes, is it really possible that I could be a son? See, like we could be incredibly gifted, but if we don't know that we're a son, that we're a daughter, if we don't know the Father's love, he's just weeping. Is it really possible that I could be a son, that the Father would actually love me? Another spiritual follower of mine, Winky Pratney, who was really catalytic in the Jesus People movement and really catalytic for YWAM. He told me the story about his dad. His dad was Maori, which is like the equivalent of an American Indian in New Zealand. And so he grew up in New Zealand, and his dad was this athlete, and he was a road bike. He was a road bike champion, so he would go hundreds of miles. And he was in his mid-70s, and he wanted to do one last ride where it would be not to compete, but just to finish. There's this famous race in New Zealand. It's 3 days, and you go like 100 kilometers a day. And he's like, hey, I want to do this race. I want to participate in this race. So he goes to the racing board, and they're concerned, or you might die. Like there's young 20-year-olds, early 20-year-olds doing this race, and we know that you're not going to like compete, but like we're concerned for your health. You're in your mid-70s. This is a very difficult ride, and he's like, no, I want my son to document it, to video it, and I really want to do this. And so they all voted and said, you know what, to honor this man who was a legend in our sport, we're going to let him, have one last lap, one last hurrah, and he's not qualified to compete, but he could ride in the race as an honor. And so the first day he rides, and he ends up like getting in 4th place. And so they're like, okay, well, hey, this is 3 days long. Like, he's probably in like a hyperbaric chamber now. Like he's probably, he's probably not even going to show up tomorrow, And so he shows up, and because of him not actually like competing, they put him in the middle because it felt a little like this 74-year-old guy just beat a lot of people. He got like 4th, and so they put him more in the middle of the pack. And he's like, all right, and he goes, and he gets to like the 10th, like the end of the second day. Like he moves up, and he gets to like, 10th place. And they're like, okay, this guy must be taking steroids. Like there's like chatter going on. Like what is this guy doing? He has the body of a 74-year-old, and it should not be, at the pace of these early 20-year-olds that have been training, that are competing. And so anyways, they put him a little bit more like in like the 20th place at the beginning of the 3rd day, and he is hitting some walls, and he's still like staying in that 20 range deal. And then the last like 10 kilometers, because they have kilometers over there, so the last almost 10 miles, he finds another gear, and then he starts passing people. And it's the last few kilometers he gets to the lead pack, and he finds another gear. It ends up getting 1st place. So, the reporters are freaking out, and he's putting away his bike and disabling it, and he puts him in the car, and him and Winky leave, and Winky pulls over and goes, Dad, that was one of the greatest moments of my life. Like I've never seen anyone get to that place, and how did you deal with them keep putting you in the middle of the pack, and like how'd you? And he said, son, it's not where you start that matters. It's where you finish. That's what matters. And there's giftings in this room. Like, it's your giftings will take you there, but it's your character, it's this place of identity that will keep you there. That we're called to be a part of a move of God that never ends, that hopefully after that we keep our identity as a son, as a daughter secure, knowing that who our Father is and knowing who we are in our Father. Because we're called to finish this race well. And there might be times that we mess up. There might be times that we lose our momentum, but it's all about finishing well. And the Father's love is one of the main ingredients to finish well. To know that you're a son, to know that you're a daughter. So just stand up with me. If we just have maybe just the worship team come on up for a second, and maybe we could just play that song that we ended with. And just maybe the team come on up here. And I'm just going to pray for you guys. If there's something in you that says, man, I want to know more of the Father's love. I want to know more of the spirit of adoption. Then I want to invite you just to come up here. And we're just going to pray. Maybe I feel like the Lord is going to redeem and restore childhoods in this room. That this is a safe place. You need to understand, like, this community, this pastoral team, like, they are safe people. They're safe fathers and mothers. And they're releasing a sound in this region that it's safe to be sons and daughters. And that is one of the beginning places to see a harvest. And so it's not too late to be a son or daughter. But if there's something in you that says, man, I want to know more. I want to know more about the Father's love. I want to go deeper in the Father heart of God. And to just have it solidified to another level that I'm a son, that I'm a daughter. Just come on up here and the team will pray for you. And this is a place that you never graduate from. And as we sing this song, I like there's going to be some people just even in the congregation that are just going to get touched with the Father's love. And see, here's the deal, as they just begin to just get ready, is people ask, like, Chad, how do you move in the prophetic? How do you move in, like, all the healing and all that stuff? And I said, well, because I had an encounter when I was 18 years old with the Father's love. It was when I got slain in the Spirit for the first time. I didn't know it was possible to go to heaven. I thought that was reserved for the apostles and, like, Paul and the whole deal. And I got hit with the Spirit of God, and I went flying. My friends said I was like a fish out of water being electrocuted. And I began to shake so hard, but I began to see a new reality, and it was the Father sitting on the throne. And he leaned towards me, and he opens his mouth, and I don't hear anything, but out of his mouth comes waves. And these waves were hitting me, hitting my body, hitting my spirit, and it was causing me to shake, and it was the deepest revelation of the Father's love that I've ever received. And it was a spirit of adoption moment. And I just want to just pray for you that you'd begin to just know who you are, that you'd begin to know your Father in heaven, that you would have encounters with him where he would look to you and say, this is my son, this is my daughter whom I love and I'm well pleased with. That you wouldn't just hear my encounter, but you would have your own encounter. And it's this place of continually having encounters with the Father's love. Like, there's been times when I've just been with the Father and he'll pick me up, he'll squeeze me really tight and say, Chad, I want to play. And then he'll throw me up in the air, and Jesus, he's like, Chad, I want to play catch. And then he'll throw me up in the air, and Jesus will catch me, and then Jesus will throw me up in the air, and the Father will catch me, and I'm the ball. Like, God just wants to spend time with you. Not just so that you are a servant and do ministry, but he's your friend. He loves you. He likes hanging out with you. And so just close your eyes right now. And if you could just imagine that you're standing at the banks of a river. And you could see your friends, your family on the banks of the river, and you see this spiritual father in the middle of the river, and he's wooing you to come into the river. And there's something inside of you that you could feel in your spirit, like this is a moment where everything changes. And as you get closer and closer, and as you get to that spiritual father, he dips you back into the river. And as you come up, you see the heavens open. And you see a dove manifest and come down and rest right upon your life. And you hear a voice, not with your ears, but in your spirit, you hear a voice, this voice that created the heavens and the earth and is directed completely at you. I mean, there's some of you in this room that you have this lie that God has picked you over, that he's always choosing the person to your left and right. You need to understand the spirit of adoption is here this morning and that he has chosen you. And that you would hear the Father of creation, the Father of glory, speak over your life. This is my son, this is my daughter, whom I love, and I am well pleased with. So I'm just going to do one last thing. Just keep on receiving. Some of you are just having encounters with the Father's love right now. Back in 2003, I was in a small group with a guy named Banning Leapshire, and he had his first daughter, and they were new parents, and they were trying to transition their daughter from sleeping in their room to her own room. And so they got he was a small group, me and him, and about 3 other guys, and he was just kind of processing with us, this season of I'm just like a new dad. Banning Leapshire's over Jesus Culture now in Sacramento, and so this is kind of the beginning days of him learning how to be a father, and so he's just talking to us, and he got wisdom from his parents, from CJ's parents, his wife's parents, okay, hey, just put her in her own room. She's gonna cry, she's gonna scream mommy, and you just gotta put on a loud movie, you gotta put on some loud music, and don't worry, it'll just be for a phase. She'll just cry for a couple nights, and then she'll get used to it. And so the first night, the daughter's screaming, mommy, mommy, and Banny's just comforting her, it's gonna be okay, CJ, stay strong, let's get the movie up, higher. And the second night, his daughter's screaming, mommy, and then half an hour later, she changes her heart cry, and she begins to scream out, daddy, daddy. And Banning found himself running up the stairs, screaming, I'm coming, daddy. And he's looking at CJ how could you leave her up there so long? It's okay, you can sleep in our room until you're 18 years old. And how many of us know that is the heart of the Father? That when the spirit of adoption comes on us, and that we know that we're sons and daughters, and when we cry out to him, he cannot resist the heart cries of his sons and daughters. And so this morning, this is what I want us to do, just to end the service, and we could worship just a little bit longer, but just put your hands up. But I want this to be a prophetic act in your life, but also in Michigan, that this would be a prophetic act, that we are lifting our hands up to be picked up by our daddy, and that we begin to just say, daddy, and knowing that when we put our hands up and we say daddy, that he can't resist to pick us up. So here we are, your sons and daughters. Papa, Daddy, here we are, your sons and daughters. Come and pick us up. Just come and embrace us this morning. And I pray, Lord, for this state, for this region, that it would be saturated in the love of God. It would be saturated where we would know you as our Father. Sons and daughters, your children crying out to you. So just begin to cry out to him. Who cares who's to your left or right? Just in your own language, in your own way, just with your own words. Your voice carries weight. Your voice changes the atmosphere. And begin to just love on your dad. Just crash in. Let's just sing this one last time. But everybody, that's just, if you can, if you're having an encounter with the Father, amazing. But I want us just to sing. There's something about the power of agreement. There's something about this place where your voice begins to carry weight. That you would declare that we have a Father that is running after, that he will go anywhere and everywhere to encounter us with his love. So let's just sing this one last time and declare this over a generation. Declare this in our school systems. Declare this in our businesses, that you would declare this in Michigan. That we be known for the Father's love crashing in on a generation.
Thank you, God. You know, I was standing here and I heard the Holy Spirit say, because I'm having this conversation with myself of like, God, I want them to walk out and never forget who they are. Never to forget. Never to forget. It's just like, and I understand that there's like the process of renewing your mind, right? We understand that, right? But there's also something that happens when the Holy Spirit comes and just gives you the revelation that you've been sealed with the spirit of adoption. That you no longer have to question. Matthew doesn't say to me, now, am I your son? Just want to check because it's been about 28 years. I just want to make sure that I'm still your son. And you are his son. You are his daughter. And when you come into a place of sonship, can I just say sonship? And we understand it means son or daughter. It doesn't, like when you have that revelation, just know that he's calling that out to you. You don't ever have to ask him, but what happens is that you have to understand what it's like to actually be a son. And so there's going to be that process of walking that out, and we're going to be here to walk that out with you. Because there's no greater love than to know that you are exactly who you're supposed to be. And you don't have to be like anybody else because you're amazing. You're amazing. And anybody that's told you anything else, we break off all of those lies because they're not true. They're not true. And when you realize that they're not true, then who you really are begins to come out. So for, so many times I'd have to wake up and say, oh, I'm a daughter. And I'd look in the mirror and you know what? Say, today you look good. Why? Because you're a child of God. Your Father is the creator and maker of all heaven and earth, and he looks at you and says you're amazing. He looks at you and calls you good. And there's nothing that you can do to change that. Do you understand that? Isn't that good? Come on, give him a shout. I want us to close probably a little differently than what you're expecting, but I'm an extrovert, but yet I'm also a very deep thinker. And so sometimes I find myself like mentioned the last few weeks of like, I feel like I'm I'm kind of somber. Does that make sense? It's like, I don't understand everything that God is doing. And so it's like, I feel a seriousness in the hour. But if I'm not careful, that level of like being somber and serious and trying to hear from the Lord can lead into a depression, because you become a deep thinker. And even in this situation right here, God has moved deeply on your heart, and there's been crying, and there's been, just an awareness of acceptance. And if we're not careful, if we stay just in that place, we can sink back into a state of depression. So what I want to do is I want to kick the devil right in the butt, and I want us to stand to our feet. And I understand that there's deep things that are going on, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I also know that joy is a mark that we have as Christians of the love of God. And there's something about joy that causes us to go, oh, yeah, that's right. And it kind of like brings us back to reality and perspective. Is that good? So I think we should leave with a jumping, I know they love it when I do this, but with a really like jumping like song. And then also, I just want us to give a shout, just to let all of heaven know that we know who we are and whose we are. Because there's something about releasing a sound. Does that make sense? And so let's do that. On the count of 3, I just want you to give your Father, your amazing, loving Father, who is so good all the time in every circumstance of life. He's always with you. He'll never leave you. He'll never forsake you. He wants to empower you. He wants to encourage you. He wants you to know that you're loved. He wants you to experience joy unspeakable and full of glory. He wants you to know how amazing that you are, because he created you, and he's an amazing Father, and he doesn't create crap. He creates things that are good. So give him a shout. Come on, give him a shout.
Yeah.